Good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Top Voice Tuesday. I'm on with Cory Warfield, and I couldn't be more excited to have a conversation today about real disruption. We were chatting before we went live, and Cory's got some really mind-blowing things to talk about. Before we get started, as always, for those of you that are dialing in live, please do leave a note in the chat. Let us know where you're dialing in from. Leave a question. Cory likes to do things off the cuff, so we'll take a question here and there where we need to, and then we'll please do follow us on YouTube. As I mentioned last week, we are a full live podcast now on all platforms. We're super excited about that. It's been a great journey, and we're making the turn to the second half of 2025. So Cory, I'm going to give you a chance to introduce yourself and your amazing background. And before we talk about the real disruption happening because of AI, which you're going to give us an insight into, the first question is always, tell us who you are, tell us what you do, and how did you get to the top of the Top Voice Mountain?
Well, it's interesting that they almost didn't let me onto the mountain, and when they did the kickoff call for those of us that got into the Top Voice program, I guess 2 years ago, they called me out not by name, and it was interesting. But I think to answer your question, something I'm just realizing about myself, who am I, is I am a musician, right? That's who I am. And what I hope to inspire and invoke in everyone watching this is that everyone is a musician, right? But for me, I can say I'm a musician in as much as I grew up with the piano in my living room. I took lessons, I played recitals, I got a guitar teacher, I was a front man of bands. I got a Tascam Porta Studio '07 back in the '90s and recorded music out of my basement that ended up on the radio. And so I've always been a musician and a promoter and a producer and a sound engineer and a DJ and all of these things. And it led me, in the 90s, I tried to take music really seriously. I won and then lost a recording contract as a rapper. A magazine at the time wrote about me, and I got signed. And then they said they had another rapper that looked similar to me from the same part of the country that had just had a song make it on the radio. He was signed, I believe, by Dr. Dre, and so they didn't want to have two light-skinned lyricists from the Midwest at the same time. And so I was dropped from that label, and frankly that actually made me lose my mind. And so I decided I was going to be a gangster rapper and a drug dealer, and I was going to go around the country and perform and sell CDs out of my trunk. And it didn't work out very well. So I got robbed a bunch of times and arrested a bunch of times and ended up homeless in the end of the '90s. And so I spent a couple of years living on the streets, begging for change, eating out of garbages, um, and just really, having been brought up in a good household and gone to college on an academic scholarship and things like that. It was very, very interesting to find myself with no friends, no family per se, no hope really. And at some point around the turn of the millennium, I started washing dishes at a restaurant. I'd found myself, even when I was homeless, I always had pretty girlfriends and they'd always take care of me. So I had some pretty girl that took me to the mountains of Colorado. And, she basically was like, okay, now let's go back to, where she was at, where she'd found me on the streets. And I basically said, no, I'm good. I don't need to go back to that nothing. I'll stay here in this nothing because it has a better view. And so I started living in a garage with another guy. There was no electricity, no running water. This is kind of just before smartphones or actually cell phones. And I started washing dishes at a restaurant. And I like to say they couldn't get rid of me because they had power and hot water, and they fed me and they paid me. But frankly, I did a good job. And so they made me a busboy, and Peter Yarrow, who was Peter from Peter, Paul and Mary, he loved me as his busboy. And so he had them promote me to a waiter, and I did a great job there. So I became their bartender, and so I ended up managing the place, got certified as a sommelier, and started working at nicer and nicer restaurants. And so I spent years in restaurants, and sometimes I was a manager or an executive, and sometimes I was a bartender or a waiter. And but I was able to make around that six-figure mark for years and years. And so having come from, like, being completely homeless without a penny to my name, to, you know, living in a nice place and being able to support my parents who at the time were still alive and things of that nature was pretty cool. And so I opened up some top steakhouses, and I was working at one, and my clientele were amazing. And it's, you know, so sometimes people get annoyed with name dropping, but in this case, it's not out of pride. But I was the personal waiter of people like Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones, and Common from, you know, I'm from Chicago. He's a big rapper, but
Yeah.
Michael Jordan when he came in, or Vince Vaughn, all of them, and even the sports team. So I was written in. I was actually on the ESPN TV show every year because the Chicago Bears would come in and have their rookie party with me. Magic Johnson would come in and I would be his waiter. You know, then Vice President Biden, or I had Bill Clinton would come in and I'd get, you know, security clearance to, right. And it was cool until I realized it wasn't. And I think it was one of my celebrity clientele, and they were treating me really well one night, and they left me a good tip. And I just had this epiphany where we weren't equal. Right. And it wasn't like I was just hanging out with this person. It was like I was just this person's servant, and I wasn't even like their right. And so I realized that I put these thoughts in my head where I was a servant in the castle, and you know, close to 30, I guess. No, close to 40. And I thought, I don't want to be, you know, going into my 40s as a servant in the castle. And I didn't feel as though I had a whole lot to show for it. I was still making music. You know, I never gave up music, but my music had never, ever, ever hit, you know, not the way I'd hoped that it would. And so at some point about 10 years ago, I said, I'm done. I'm done with restaurants and being a servant. And I know all the problems in the restaurant industry. And so I'm going to solve it with technology. I'd always been a technologist. I was even still dabbling throughout my time in restaurants, just kind of as a hobbyist. And so we created a platform that ultimately raised a couple rounds of funding and became part of the tech stack of some of the big restaurant chains and part of the compliance engine. And so it was really kind of a, you know, I jumped into the deep end. I had no clue what I was doing. I had never really had a corporate job, and I didn't know how to really, you know, run a company, but I read some books and watched some YouTube. And ultimately that company I exited years ago, but that company ended up going on to do some things, and they, I believe, had an acquisition for the technology itself. But so that was all years and years ago. But what enabled me to launch the company, grow the company, you know, fundraise for the company was LinkedIn. And I, you know, I just learned the algorithms so well, and I learned the the psychology so well. And I know I'm rambling, so I'll be quick, but I'll give a quick shout out that I don't do often enough. Shout out to Carrie Luxem. She was one of the original LinkedIn influencers in the restaurant industry. And at the time, they had just let people start posting videos, and she was a young blonde executive. And so her videos went really viral. And they owned like 100 Dunkin' Donuts, and I wanted Dunkin' as a client. So I used to reach out to her. We were connected somehow. She was a Chicago girl. And so I'd reach out and I would just pitch her, like trying to sell her this software. And finally she goes, Cory, listen, I'm not buying your software. She goes, I don't like people pitching me on LinkedIn, and we don't need it. And she's like, frankly, our locations have like 4 employees and they're all related and they don't have schedules. So we don't need we don't need your scheduling software. But not only do I like you, she's like, I see you're trying to, like, you know, do some stuff on LinkedIn. I'll give you a recommendation. You should do videos of yourself. And I was kind of like, no, you know, you're a pretty blonde girl, so of course yours do well, but I'm just some old white dude, right? Like nobody wants to see me. Which ultimately I still maintain that thesis. But so she convinced me to do videos, and those ended up what kind of made me famous and fast tracked me to 100,000 followers. And it's funny, I think all these years later, she's probably got 30 or 40,000 followers. And you know, I think
Laughter.
yeah, well, yeah, I think I had more strategy, right? And what she did early on is she started to delegate to teams and had people run her personal brand. And I've never compromised my personal brand, right? I've just always tried to keep it very authentic. But Carrie changed my life, and Carrie's still very awesome. So if anyone's in restaurants, Carrie Luxem Consulting Group is an amazing way to grow your restaurant.
Yeah. Wow. What a story. And, you know, I think for folks that are meeting this community of top voices, I think what we're learning is that we come from all walks of life and backgrounds and industries and disciplines. And people are probably wondering now, so what does that background that Cory has have to do with AI and disruption? And I think what's so great when we first met is your willingness to jump in the deep end and try new things and move into the next wave without having all the answers. And so we want to pick your brain a little bit, Cory, given your Renaissance orientation. So let's jump in and talk about what we're all experiencing. And the purpose of this conversation is to go deep. And so we talk about AI, everyone's talking about it, but what's the part of AI that everyone's talking about, but we're not really ready for, and we don't really understand all the way? What bigger shifts are we not talking about enough?
Well, I think the biggest one, and certain circles are talking about it at nauseum, but they're still not talking about it enough, but is super intelligence, right? Super intelligence is very, very close. It will be here. This is IQs said to be in the tens of thousands. Um, Comparatively, a super intelligence would be equivalent to being smarter than every human being ever put together and multiplied, right? It's
Wow.
and it's very close, right? Meta is very close. The original co-founder of OpenAI is very close. Ilya, OpenAI, frankly, is fairly close. Google has been very good about not taking steps further towards their super intelligence that frankly they could be taking right now. But so that's what we're wholly unready for. And corporations aren't ready for it, civilization isn't ready for it, people aren't ready for it. It will render humans all but obsolete. Um, and we're already seeing things like the Turing test was passed months ago, which means AI can be undistinguishable from humans. We're now seeing things like Grok 4 being able to get 100% on all of the advanced level testing, bar exam, LSATs, without ever having seen the questions before. So the question isn't how smart is the intelligence, it's fully smart, right? We see the more compute you throw at AI specifically, the much more capable it gets. And we're seeing breakthroughs in semi-computing, right? We're starting to see, different types of chips that aren't, just graphic processing units. We're seeing language processing units, and we're seeing really, really capable ways of increasing compute, even without increasing our carbon footprints. And so the super intelligence, it's going to be here, and it will disrupt life as any of us know it, business as any of us know it, employment as any of us know it. And so I don't think that can be overstated. However, out of the same soundbite, I do want to say that where I also think, and I just spoke on a big stage in Istanbul, Turkey about this. I do believe that AI and super intelligence, if we get it right, will take the human life expectancy to the hundreds or thousands, and will open up access to other dimensions, frankly, than the third dimension. And I do believe that it will make humankind capable of near immortality and also time travel. And I've already experienced some technologies that can move the needle in all of those ways, frankly. And so that's the other side of it. Is I think it's one thing to say companies are going to fire a bunch of people. Of course, they have been and keep doing that. But I think much more than that is, we may find ourselves at a point where we can prove that we're living in a simulation, and if so, what we can do about that to benefit humanity as well. So I'll stop and let you take it in any direction you want. But I think there's some real big stuff at play right now.
Yeah, we could go in a lot of different directions, and I think for those of you listening, you can see why Cory is really operating at a different level here. And I remember when we met, I hadn't even considered some of these conversations, but let's maybe go down and not go up for a second. You made a comment about people being obsolete, and then made a comment about companies firing everyone. And there's this concept of kind of a post-labor economy, and really disrupting the idea of what we as humans, particularly in the knowledge space, offer as value. How does that formula or that experience break out? Because I've heard people say AI will only ever be as good as the people that have created it, because it can't create. But you're giving us a different point of view that it can and it is. So what's that middle space for companies if people don't really need to work anymore? What does a post-labor economy look like?
Well, in my assessment and others kind of in my world, the only actual solution and fix is universal basic income. And I've spent years researching universal basic income from implementations and pilots and the data behind it. Interestingly, universal basic income is one of two things that can reduce virtually all mental health issues to almost zero, the other being AI music. And there's a lot of scientific and university studies to support both of those. But so we say there has to be UBI, and the beautiful thing is that they're really great business models behind UBI. Right. So it doesn't make people lazy. It's non-governmental. It should be completely unconditional. It is not merit-based. Right. It actually typically increases productivity throughout populations. Um, but so universal basic income is very, very important. And a lot of us are working on that. But the other thing is understanding that we societally have been in the attention economy for quite some time. And a lot of us still live in that attention economy, which makes a lot of sense. We're overwhelmed and inundated with things to take our attention from us, right? And people have found ways to monetize that. And so if I can monetize one person's attention and then get a million more, then okay, great. We're in an attention economy. What we're moving into, and then we'll move past, is the intention economy, right? So understanding what people are going to want before they even want it. And you can look at Amazon, and their last mile delivery was a good example of that. Understanding how much of what things do we need and what proximity to what populations, so that it costs us less to get it to them and they can get it quicker and makes them buy more. And right, all of this intention. And so we say, what are we going to do societally? Well, we need to understand the intention of humanity. What's one thing that all humans want? Well, we all want to feel needed. Right? We all want to feel productive. We all want to feel loved. We all want to feel part of something, but we all want to be entertained. Right? Here's another thing. We all want us to feel good. Right? Some people want to see everyone succeed, others want to see everyone else fail, but we all have this innate right energy in us to propel ourselves forward, right? It's survival, right? And when we don't have that, then that's a form of depression. And then we say, okay, so get some UBI and some AI music in their hands, and now they won't be depressed, right? So I think understanding this intention, the societal intention, understanding that there are certain words that we don't always love to use. But when you think of generations of people where life was working for someone else to make someone else more money so that you can provide for your basic needs, um, we could call it serfdom or feudalism, or right? I mean, there are a lot of words, and a lot of people call that slavery. I think I understand people that wouldn't like that word ascribed to that, but we can see kind of this trading of time for, even if you're making $1 million a year, right? But you're trading all your time for it. There's not a lot of give. There's not a lot of life to live in that equation. And so understanding that companies like, I'll use Google as an example, Alphabet, they will make billions and billions of more dollars every year, every month, every week, and then every day than they used to with their AI tools. Meanwhile, they will be paying billions less in payroll a month than a week than they are right now. What happens to those billions of dollars?
That's what
Right
I was
now,
going to
they're
ask. Is where does
right.
the money come from in this equation? And universal basic income is a controversial topic, particularly in the United States, where we have our very heavy capitalist heritage, and we're going through socially and politically a lot of turmoil at the moment, rooted in some of these concepts. But let's maybe set the moral argument down for just a minute and say, where does the money come from in an environment where the machines are doing the work.
Yeah, well, so it's the work is still generating money, right? And so the concept is Google goes from making $1 billion a day at a 80% profit margin to making $1 billion a day at a 20%. Right? The numbers are reversed, right?
Numbers are
All of
flipped.
a
Yeah.
sudden, they're making 60% more margin, the same revenue, it just costs them less to make. What we argue for is that a percentage of that delta should go into a liquidity pool for humanity. And it should not be merit based. It should be distributed. It should be on a blockchain so that it's on a immutable ledger. It should be uh, going to people of all merits, right? You shouldn't need it, in other words, right? But so if we take companies like mine as well, we're seeking to all, all of my companies put 10% of our bottom line revenue into this liquidity pool as well. But so what I'm working on right now is taking a couple of my companies that can generate in the millions or beyond in revenue, start to generate a liquidity pool for humanity. We've already launched our first UBI pilot in a small population, but and just start to give monies to people. And again, it's not just those that need it. We don't need you to be out looking for a job or to pass a piss test or anything, right? It's just you're in this demographic, and so you will receive monies and every month, and right, there's no judgment. There's no expectation, right? There's also no strings attached. And so we start to do that, and then we go to the alphabets, and we go to the Microsofts, and we go to the Open AIs and the XAIs, and we say, listen, we want to work with your actuaries and your financial team, and we want you to obligate and commit just a percentage of the revenue that you are making that you no longer have to pay humans to have made, right? Your leadership gets richer and richer. Your ownership gets richer and richer. You can still drive your stock price. And what this does is it gives a bunch more people more money to buy your product. And by the way, it puts you on the right side of humanity, because right now we're looking at companies, and I I don't want to say anything specific other than the Microsofts and the Googles of the world, right? I think I can say we're looking at companies like them, and we know because of people that we talk to, they have massive amounts of their human capital that they want to get rid of right now. They don't need them, right? They're paying millions of dollars in payroll, and they just don't need them. But they can't fire more people, because every time they do, here's another headline. And now Salesforce
Yeah.
is the bad guy. And now Duolingo is the bad guy. And it's right. So they're just waiting for that opportunity. And so what we're trying to do is provide them that opportunity and say, hey, listen, let's make your next headline when you lay off 20,000 people a great headline, right? And
So
if
there's
we
an interesting concept here that I want to dive into, and we've got a comment in the chat just about loving what you're describing is this very revolutionary concept, and we could spend probably the next not 30 minutes but 30 days just talking about this, and I know you're thinking about it. There's a second order effect of this conversation, which is what I call the boundaryless organization. I remember Phil Kirshner and I had this conversation. He said it very, very briefly, which was what happens when the physical boundaries of the company no longer exist because the infrastructure exists in data centers that are distributed. There's no more physical buildings because I don't need to put bodies in a place. And there's all of this then social impact on commuting and downtowns. I mean, look at what COVID did to downtown infrastructures. What you're describing is an entirely different experience. So, and maybe just one other point, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this, is we're seeing some of this even geopolitically, which is the idea of the immigration concept and conversation that we're having here in the United States, which is about physical boundaries and statesmanship and I am a citizen of a country, but now I'm not an employee of a company, but I'm being paid somehow and they're generating money. I could be anywhere when I'm doing it, right? What does this mean for the corporate entity?
I think that corporate entity is effectively done. I think we are going to see a massive change of the guard in every aspect. I also will say I don't know that we're going to be able to maintain high levels of nationalism as an earthbound human race. I look at things like BRICS, and I'm here in Rio de Janeiro where the BRICS conference is happening. I've also been in blockchain for a decade and crypto, and I know that's the word we don't say on LinkedIn, but for a long time. And so I've been paying attention to BRICS for years, and I wholly understand what is about to happen to the global economy. And as an American and frankly a patriot, I want to see the US dollar very strong as well. But I do understand, we're already seeing disruption in everything from the markets to the meme coins and the altcoins. And there's already been a massive shift of wealth. We see people putting billions of dollars into Bitcoin and into, you know, the
Yeah.
the different tokens that I don't need to give give
Need too many
airwaves
names.
to, yeah, right. But really, right, we are seeing this disruption already. And 100% tariffs are not sustainable. I think a lot of the economists who understand tariffs, have some very strong points of view right now. But I think what I seek to do, or to effectuate in any ways that I can, is really a kind of a return to homeostasis as a human race. Because when I see what China is doing with their AI, it's incredible. And we can't have an AI race. We can't have it. There's no winner in an AI race, right? And especially when we start to think about artificial general intelligence and then super intelligence, if we as a fragmented people are against an intelligence that is far smarter, more capable than any of us, and we're fragmented, there's it's a really, really bleak forecast. Meanwhile, if we bring together these incredible PhD minds from around the world, and I look at places like India. India is the fastest growing population. It's now the most populous country in the world. It's the fastest growing economy, and frankly, I believe, and it's not a contest, but I believe a lot of very, very, very brilliant minds and entrepreneurs and engineers and mathematicians and are coming out of India right now. And so India is the eye in BRICS, right? Just like here in Brazil, I'm meeting a lot of incredible programmers and coders and entrepreneurs. And um, I don't think we want to get into a scenario where people are no longer parts of companies, but they are parts of countries, and those countries determine what companies they're able to
Mm.
leverage, because we're all going to want to use all of this tech very soon. And I have every reason to believe that we're going to see a massive explosion, both economically and technologically, out of Africa. I think we're going to want to make sure that we have access to their technology, and frankly, make our technology more accessible to them. And so I think we're seeing a big realignment. I think sometimes
Yeah.
you have to see, things get broken down to get built back up. One of the things that probably isn't a good spend of time on today's show, but I do have a growing and very large number of people that are backing my bid for presidency next time around. And so we're already doing things like getting the paperwork to file, and
Mm.
looking at office spaces and things of that nature.
All right. Well, we'll
Interest.
see you. Yeah, we'll see you if we get to that point. I want to make sure, Cory, that we've got time where we're going to go a little over, but I think we could just keep going on this. One of the things you've said, and I think you've painted a picture of a level of disruption that what I would call the everyday person, each of us individually only has a small portion of control over. What are three ways that we as individuals can be present and be ready for the kind of disruption that you're talking about?
Amazing. That's a very, very poignant question. I'd say the most important thing right now, I would say, and I'll start with even the most. Find ways to prioritize your mental health, right? So some of us, we think the sky is falling because AGI is coming, and right. But if that doesn't serve you, don't tune into all the headlines. If turning off the news about, who's accused of what and who's covering what up right now, if that's not serving you, whatever we as individuals can do for our mental health right now to lower our stress or anxiety, to give ourselves the space and capacity to treat others with love and respect and courtesy and all of that, I think nothing else matters if we don't have that. And it does start with ourselves. When people see us treating ourselves better, then it inspires and encourages them. So I think that's the most important. But I do think it's closely followed by, please, 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 please familiarize yourself with AI. It's all free. You can ask it how to use itself. It is its own instruction manual. Learning how to use it doesn't mean you have to use it every day. It doesn't mean that you're going to get stuck in a K-hole of reading AI books and listening to AI music and watching AI generated fake videos, but at least know what the different tools do. Understand how to get it to do things that you might want it to do if that serves you. And if not, find out how other people are using it to do things that they need, because I see so many people that are willfully ignorant, or they're saying, "Oh, this tool doesn't work well." You go, "Okay, when's the last time you tried Perplexity?" Right? Because if you're telling me Perplexity is not awesome, I think you haven't used it in the last 2 months, right? Because
Right.
I look at their comment and I look at their labs and I say, "My God, Perplexity is the most amazing technology I've ever seen." But so do familiarize yourself with the landscape. So I think prioritize mental health, understand just kind of what's happening so you can make your own judgments. And then, I guess if there's a third, it would be prepare for a post-labor economy. And what I think that really does look like is I think everyone should just figure out what their version of entrepreneurship is going to look like, right? Just understanding how to help solve problems, how to rally resources, understanding how to be part of something bigger than yourself, because we will need entrepreneurs, right? And it takes an entrepreneurial mind to learn how to use AI. It takes an entrepreneurial mind to learn how to go and fix the roads in your downtown if the city's not right. All of these things take an entrepreneurial mindset. But I really do think if people watching this are prioritizing those three things, and if we do that at scale, I think we've got tons of cause for optimism.
I love that, Cory. What a great set of recommendations. And I'd love to keep going. I want to get to your bonus question, which we ask every guest to leave for the next guest. And I think this is really appropriate because you're in the middle of your journey and still going. If you had to write your memoir today, what would you title it and why?
Oh, that's an easy one, and I've done something like 300 or 400 podcasts, and I end all of them with the same thing as well. But so for me, the name of it would be Love More, and the entire concept would be Love More. And typically, when I'm asked to leave a final thought on a podcast or a show or an interview, it's the same: Love More. And I always love to say that's not a message just for the ears hearing it. It's a message to myself. It's a message to those who will never hear this. It's a message to the person, to you, Michael, and also the person that I just sent to you, Michael, too, that heard it with their, right. We can all love more. And what that really means to me is loving ourselves more, loving those that didn't vote the way that we voted more, loving those who don't eat the same type of food or cheer for the same sports team or even the same type of sport more, right? Loving people that don't agree with you or don't look the way that you love people to look, just loving more. And it takes you down this kind of rabbit hole of loving love more and loving the absence of love more, and this concept of don't hate anyone, just love the hell out of them more. And it's right, like at this point it's easy for me to say I'm the CEO of a company called Loving Is, and we're literally teaching algorithms, machines, and computers as well as robots what love is. So it's become part of my ethos. But I've been suggesting and saying love more for many years before we even co-founded the Loving Is
Love it.
company. So yeah, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I love it. What a great message to end on. And it fits with everything you've talked about, Cory. Thank you, everyone, for dialing in, tuning in, for the comments. This is going to be an episode I think you're going to want to go back and listen to and take Cory's advice and be ready. Thank you for being part of the Top Voice community, and we'll see you next Tuesday.